Well, that's a difficult question to answer. There's many ways that you can answer that, to be honest. One way would be that it's a benevolent art form that toys with human attention and perception. And another way would be to say that it is the experience of having reality altered or subverted. And what's interesting about that is that one kind of comes from our side and one might come from their side. One is the act of doing and one is the experience of. Because ultimately, we don't do magic, they do. In the sense that what we do is play with objects, and really there's a dialogue between objects and ideas. And what that is a catalyst for the potential experience of magic. Ultimately, what we do is the craft, and what they do is the art. Or at least that's how I see it. Another way of thinking about what magic is that it's a deception game. But there are no winners or losers, there are just players. The interesting thing about that is that they don't know how to play, and we do. And our kind of role, I suppose, is to guide them towards the end, even though they don't know how to play. And that's what makes it really interesting to me. It's very difficult to define exactly what it is, and every definition becomes reductive to some extent. I suppose that ultimately it's a collaborative act between a magician and a non-magician. Although, to be perfectly honest, it's kind of unclear which person is which. Well, when you begin, it's definitely about looking cool or impressive, maybe showing off. But over time, if you really love it, it gives way to something a bit deeper. And for me, it's a way of being in the world. You know, it's a tool for kind of understanding lots of elements of life. It's really the only subject I've ever studied. And I find lots of subjects very interesting, but it's the only one that's kept me interested from day one. And that's changed over time. I think that when I first began, it was just about learning cool methods or maybe sleights or stuff like that. But over time, that gave way to many other things like strategy and tactics, timing, balance, movement, creativity, psychology, technique. There's so many elements. And I think when you begin, it all gets reduced down to a method for how something works. And over time, you start to curate those methods and you start to distill them, and you start to see kind of beauty in the design or the execution or the application or the initial idea. And you start seeing deeper things. And in doing that, you start learning a lot about yourself, maybe. You learn a lot about what works and what doesn't. And you kind of see those things echoed in other areas. And so I suppose, like for me, there's many reasons as to why. You know, I like so many elements of it. You know, if it was just one particular dimension that I liked, like I just liked doing a slight, then I think I would become very bored over time. If it was I just liked reactions, then again, I think you would become bored over time. Initially, when you start, you get reactions and you think to yourself, wow, you've never had this type of a reaction before. The fact that you can even manifest that is an interesting thing. But over time, you realize that that's almost inevitable. You know that someone is going to kind of find this amazing. And so you need to find deeper things. And it's probably like any art form, really. I suppose that you start to fall in love with the craft, and you realize how much these small, subtle changes that no one else will appreciate. Anyone else that can't speak the language won't really appreciate them. But when you really start loving them and falling in love with them, you start seeing the effect that it has on the art form. And like I've said, that to me, that what we do is the craft and what they experience is the art. And I think that you start seeing that connection. And yeah, it just keeps getting deeper and wider. You start seeing more and more. It's definitely a journey, like many things. I think you end up, everything, seems impressive and amazing when you first start. And then you often hit a plateau. And then you discover something new again. And I've had that forever. And to me also, I honestly believe it's one of the most beautiful and profound crafts, art forms that exist, because you're playing with the nature of someone's perception. You're playing with their attention, their awareness, their memory. And instead of it being fragmented over time, instead of it being like a film or something that's happening elsewhere in a studio and being produced, it's happening live now in the moment. And you're having to become aware of so many things and play this chess match with them around something as simple as the change or the transformation of a playing card. And I just find that process intoxicating almost. It's really difficult to describe to someone why you would find that so interesting. But I think you have to fall in love with it. And if you fall in love with it, you really don't need to explain why. It's just something that will always be there. Well, I suppose this depends who is asking that type of a question and what stage you are in your kind of magic journey, if that exists. I suppose it does. For me, the way I would answer that, I'm not going to answer this, in regards to a professional or someone who wants to earn a living doing magic. I think that's a different game, and I'm more interested in speaking about someone who's learning, or someone who even does it casually, someone within their first 5 years maybe. And when you're trying to develop a lot of skills, I think that really you have to just do it everywhere. Like, you have to get the miles in, earn your stripes, and do it as much as you can within reason. Don't outstay your welcome in some areas or magic people to death. But the more that you can perform early on in different environments, the more you'll learn. And every single environment brings new challenges. And that will help your development. It will help everything about it. If you're aware, you really want to pay attention, perform, and when something bad happens, or there's a mistake or an error or something didn't go as well as you'd hoped, you just have to analyze that and have a feedback loop with yourself where you're critical. Be self-critical. And, take fun, obviously, take joy from what you're doing. But the more that you can do, the more that you can put experience in your back belt, so to speak, the better that is. If you're kind of developing skill on the side and you're thinking and learning and practicing and reading, and you're also experiencing, and you're putting that into the world. That's the best school more than anything. You can learn a lot from many different sources. You can read, or like people here trying to come in and learn some of the stuff that I'm teaching. But the reality is that the best teacher is going to be experience. It's going to be putting yourself into environments where you're forced to sink or swim sometimes. Sometimes you'll be out of your depth. And, not too many of those things, because you could drown, but a couple of those is good. You want to avoid constantly being in a comfort zone. Very quickly people develop an area that they know that they can perform in and they feel comfortable in. And you want to try and avoid constantly moving into those comfort zones. If you can do things that are a bit scary, maybe you're just out of your depth, that's really good. I think that early on, you want to put yourself in as many performing situations as possible. And I think over time, you earn the right to be selective, and you know what works for you, where you're at your best, what you enjoy the most. It's very difficult to figure that out without experiencing a kind of wide variety of different challenging situations or environments. So, yeah, I think you just perform anywhere and everywhere as much as you can. Wow, so naturalness, that is one of the most important things for a magician, I suppose. It's been talked about many times by many people over the years. Robert Houdin was one of the first to kind of say, be natural. It's mentioned by Erdnase. Vernon talked about it, this idea of be natural. Said a lot. And obviously, if you can be natural in your manner, in your movements, in your speech, it's going to help a lot when it comes to being deceptive in the way that you want. However, one of the most important things that's never said is how. It's a well and good saying, be natural, but that's like me speaking to a basketball player and just saying, score more points. The most relevant thing is how. How do I do that? If someone says you've got to do X, the next thing is how. And that's often lacking in magic, what those are. I'm going to try and tell you how now, or at least part of it. The first thing, before you do anything, is to realize that there is no such thing as naturalness. Without getting into a kind of semantic rabbit hole, nothing can really truly be natural because you are doing something unnatural. You are often doing something which is simulating something natural. So you are faking an action, or you're making something appear to be natural. So it'll never truly be natural. What we really mean is that it appears to be natural. So we're talking about a simulation of naturalness. And to do that, you have to realize that there is no right way. If I was to say right now that a certain action of placing a coin or a ball in the hand in a certain way and looking up as I do it is the natural way to do it. If we all do that, every one of us does it, then it's no longer really natural. It's a mechanical action. It's a simulation. And the goal is to really figure out how to find the roughness that's at the heart of naturalness. Something that's truly natural isn't robotic. It's roughly natural. There's a roughness at the heart of it. If you watch people that are sitting down at a restaurant or whatever, they don't operate in an entirely, completely logical, rational way. People lean back, they pick up a drink, they move it to another hand, they sit down, they suddenly scratch their head for no reason, and they're not even aware that they're doing it, whatever it is. Real natural action has a kind of an inherent roughness to it. And if you perfectly work out a natural sequence, a rational natural sequence, you can often look like a robot, you can often look mechanical. And the mammals that are watching you can smell that something's not right. They don't know why. It's almost like the uncanny valley. There's something that doesn't feel right. So for me, there's a way of thinking about naturalness that starts from a very simple idea that I think is roughly logical, and it roughly makes sense. Then I have to kind of learn to relax within it, completely relax within it, and allow to have elements of roughness creep into it. So it's not exactly the same every single time. There's a rough trend of naturalness running through it. I think that's a big part of it. Learning to be truly present and natural in your actions is to become relaxed and really there. You almost have to forget that you're doing moves in a way, or doing another sequence. And look, I'm not saying it's easy. It's not. It's tremendously difficult. It's part of what I find fascinating about naturalness is that it's a really challenging subject. It's incredibly difficult to make things appear natural and effortless, and it takes work. And so you have to really think about stuff, and you have to have the confidence to kind of allow a bit of roughness and a bit of relaxation to come in to the work. I think that smooth movements are important. So I tend to try and avoid rushed movements. Or you don't want something too slow either. Sometimes you want that Goldilocks zone, that smooth movement, almost like I imagine like trying to move like a panther, right? Panthers kind of have that kind of very smooth, elegant way of moving. I kind of think of it that way. Another thing that I often think about is a phrase that I think comes from the US Navy SEALs, which is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And it is about reloading weapons and all kinds of things. If you rush something, you're going to make a mistake and you're going to end up falling much further behind. If you operate at a slow, smooth, steady pace, you can actually achieve more results over time. So I often think about that. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And so I'm always trying to think about how can I do things with no tension, just move through things smoothly. I think that actually most of the time will override any other potential unnaturalness that might be there. If 99% of your body language, your actions, your manner, your speech, your way, whatever it is, if 99% is screaming naturalness, and there's this one move that you have to do that we could argue is unnatural, that's only 1% of the overall picture. And so if 99% of your communication is natural, that tiny little element that's unnatural just gets lost and isn't seen. And so therefore the overall expression is just one of naturalness. And so therefore I'm trying to learn to talk in a natural way and be myself. I'm trying to learn to move in a natural way and be myself. And have all of the elements that I'm doing smooth. Now, like I said, I still want to work out a roughly logical procedure that roughly makes sense, but I've got to make sure my manner, my way of executing it feels smooth. I move correctly. I don't suddenly become very stiff and upright and start talking and moving with jerking actions. I've got to make sure I move like I normally do in the real world. And I think that's one of the biggest elements of naturalness, is trying to learn how to be yourself when doing magic. And you can be yourself perfectly fine all day long. But then when you do magic, you feel this tension creep in, you feel all this other kind of anxiety, I suppose, physical and mental kind of creep in, and you become less like yourself. And so I think that the ultimate goal of naturalness is to find a way to be yourself. And you've heard this said many times probably before, easy said, hard to actually do. But that's the ultimate goal, is to find a way of truly being yourself and being relaxed and allowing the roughness of natural behavior to creep in. And if you can do that, then you're getting close to discovering something that is a very high level simulation of naturalness. Because ultimately you know that it doesn't really exist. It can't really exist. All you're doing is simulating it. So how can I simulate that better than anyone else in the world? Well, it's me doing this magic, so I have to learn how to be me. Well, there's many that I could probably talk about. If I had to think about a few. If we start from, say, the beginning of an effect, one of the most important things for me to do is to get them to shuffle. So I'll give them the cards to actually shuffle at the very beginning. And this might seem like not much of a tactic at all, really. So what are you trying to prove, that the cards can be shuffled at the beginning? But there's actually, for me, a lot of benefit that comes from that moment. There's three main benefits, I think, that come from that, and that is innocence, opportunity, and momentum. So if you hand someone the deck to shuffle, before, even if it doesn't need it, it doesn't matter, or whatever it is, the fact is what it's done is made that object innocent. Maybe not 100% innocent, but it has made the object innocent. I mean, if you can borrow a deck of cards and that happens and someone shuffles them, it's even better. But often that isn't the case. We have these by our side anyway, and they farrow correctly, and aren't kind of covered in black stuff all down the sides and like big bends in them and dog ears and stuff. Anyway, that's beside the point. If you can use a borrowed deck, by the way, do, because it just makes everything 10 times better. Fact. But the point is, if you have them shuffle at the very beginning, you're creating this air of innocence around the prop. And that is going to benefit everything that comes after. It also means that they are getting involved. And so you're starting that involvement at the very beginning. So you're getting them involved. It's making it innocent. And it also creates opportunity. And in that, the way in which someone shuffles might open up some kind of humor. Maybe it might jog a memory that they have that they might talk about. Someone else might jump in and say something based on how that person's shuffling, which actually indicates to you aspects about their relationship, and maybe even a level of humor and banter that they may have between each other. And all of this is happening just by handing someone a deck of cards. And they're shuffling. In this 1 second, they're now definitely mixed, they're innocent, and it's creating these kind of interesting potential opportunities for something else, for you to either feed back off or mention later on, or reveal something about them or the group. You can also tell by the way in which someone shuffles maybe aspects of their personality. I'm not going to get into doing some kind of strange cold reading stuff here, but I just mean it reveals something about them, how gingerly they do it, or how much they care about the prop. You can just kind of sense something. And I feel that this gives me something in the moment. And ultimately, this leads to the last thing, which is momentum. I feel that in this, it also creates some form of interaction, some form of energy and movement and momentum into what you're about to do. It means that also while they're doing that, I could also start by setting up the premise of what I'm going to do. I could start, have you ever played cards before? Or you have, I mean, you definitely have. The way you're shuffling, that's professional. Whatever it is, and you have done that, yes, okay, well, great, hand those back or give them, you can do it as well if you want, right? It gives you the chance to create some form of momentum. And instead of just standing there holding a deck and just starting talking and everything is still, in this moment, you've set up so much. There's innocence, there's definitely shuffled, there's the opportunity to learn about them and aspects of you talking about your hook. And it's created momentum into what you're going to do. Obviously, there's also like someone could drop the cards or drop them. And, some performers would find this very annoying and be like, and it could be, especially if they get your lovely cards dirty. How dare they? But all things that could possibly happen, you can learn over time how to take something from it, how to utilize it and use that momentum into something else. So I would say that getting them to shuffle at the very beginning is an absolute must. Another tactic that I'll use a lot is touch. So I want to try and have a physical connection as much as possible with them. Careful. So I will have them either hold my wrists, as you'll see in some performances that I do. I either get them to hold my wrists or maybe touch fingers, like in the touch and other things like that. There's also other ways, just by placing a hand on them as you adjust their position or move their hand in closer. There's also elements where I'll do it in the revelation sequence of Paper Switch. When I go in and I take their card out, I actually hold their hand. So I have one hand, a finger underneath and one on top. And I take this out and I throw it inside, and there's now two in there. And now I'm going to take yours out and I'm going to throw it into this pocket. And I'm just touching them in this moment. Now, what I will say about this, I'm not doing this to be creepy or because I really want to touch people. What it does to me is it breaks down an aspect of that separation, that barrier between them just observing passively and being engaged actively. Just that alone is something that will pull them into a performance. Now, you don't want to be too touchy and feely and be known as that guy and come across as creepy. You don't want that at all. And in no way am I suggesting that this is being used as some kind of strange NLP anchoring romance technique. I'm just saying that the act of being able to find ways to physically connect with someone in the moment draws them into the magic and engages them in that moment in ways that are quite interesting. And I think that by not doing that, it just creates this subtle coldness that exists about them just passively observing. So any chance that you get to be able to do that. There's also punching. There's, if they're heckling, there's aggressive punching in the face, and that solves the problem as well. But no, just pulling them into the magic. I think the ability to physically connect for just a second without it being creepy in any way, and I stress that again, is really important, and it will make a huge difference to the power and impact of even very small, simple routines. Another tactic that I end up using, this is kind of a complicated thing to talk about really, because I'm sure that 99% of people will never really understand it. And it's about having soft eyes. It's about the way in which you use your focus. If you are staring someone down and talking to them like this and not blinking or breaking eye contact and being very deliberate with everything you're saying over and over again, it can be very distancing and disconnecting. If you're breaking eye contact, talking and breaking and looking away, and you have a soft field of vision where you're kind of collectively taking everything in, but you're not appearing to really focus on anything specific, and you have the ability to kind of break eye contact, blink slowly. This isn't something I'm necessarily thinking about doing, but I'm just aware that I have a very soft form of focus. And in doing that, I think it has tremendous deceptive potential, because it allows you to gain rapport slightly easier. It allows you to manipulate attention easier. It feels much more, maybe it goes back to kind of moving like a panther. I imagine that my eyes also move like I have panther eyes. Maybe that's what it is. And they also do that. And none of it's really conscious. I think it actually comes from a state of mind of just being very soft and deliberate with people. And so I'm talking to this person, I talk to this person, and your eye contact might shift between them and move, and it's soft. And that soft focus is something which really allows you to control attention much easier. And when you do have a very specific, deliberate form of contact with someone, when you look right at them and you do something, you can then create intense focus and then come back to being soft and more deliberate, or less deliberate. So having soft eyes is a big thing. Funnily enough, this was something I talked about many, many times, and it turns out in a conversation I had with David Williamson once, he told me that term came from the world of horse whispering, where it's about approaching a horse. And if you just walk at the horse, I'm not a horse whispering expert in any way, but if you just walk at the horse deliberately, staring at the horse does not like you and it runs away. But one of the ways to get close to the horse is kind of how you kind of break eye contact and have to move in. And they talk about having soft eyes with a horse. And I think there's something very animalistic about that with eye contact. I can imagine that's the same with like bears or aggressive dogs. Like if you're staring it down, it just kind of gets even more aggressive. Whereas if you can kind of like break eye contact, I imagine that they don't eat you alive. I mean, I would have already been running, so it wouldn't matter. But the point is, I think that thinking of it in that context might help open it up a little bit. I think there's a way of doing that with an audience so that you can get close to them and they don't eat you alive. And I think having that soft form of focus, having soft eyes, is a really interesting tactic that I've used forever. And that doesn't make sense, Benjamin. How have you used it forever? I've always used it. That's better. And I think it's something that if you think about, it might start making big differences within your work. Now, this is a subject I find very interesting. If you really look at what magic is, it does something really unique as an art form. I mean, if you've ever had someone describe to you an effect they saw a magician do, almost never do they get it right. They'll describe some fabulous thing that you kind of listen to and go, oh, that sounds interesting. That never happened. But you don't want to correct them. You should never correct them. What they've often done is create an even more fabulous version of what happens. Now, without going into some long discussion about, models of memory and a lot of that type of stuff, I think as a magician, there's some very simple ways to think about it. What we do is actively affect how someone is perceiving events in the now and in the past, in a way. If you're, let's imagine a sporting game of any match, of any duel, of any sort, and there's a player that takes a ball around another player and fools them briefly, sends them the wrong way, manipulates their attention and perception of what's happening, does a shoulder drop or something, and then moves around them. Instantaneously, the defender or whatever knows what's happened, right? They're not kind of baffled and wondering how they know instantaneously what's happened. In magic, we have to kind of do the equivalent of that, and they don't know what's happened at all afterwards. We have to kind of manipulate things in different ways. Their recollection of events are skewed, and we intentionally put things in place that do that. They'll say, that never left my hand. He never touched this, or he never did this. And yet, that's literally what happened. You took this out and switched it and handed it to them, or you moved it from one side to the other. But their memory of it is very different. It's a natural part of the power of a magic effect is not about what you do, but about what they think you do. And not just in the present, but in the past. And a really simple way to think about what memory is that it is just attention in the past. That is really all memory is. Now, there's There's many, many other ways to think about that and discuss it and go into it, and long-term and short-term and all different ways of storage and retrieval and yada, yada, yada. But the point is, or false eyewitness testimony and Elizabeth Loftus' work and yada, yada, yada. But the point is this: if you really think about, as a magician, memory being attention in the past, it's going to really help utilize the manipulation of memory. It really talks about, or you really need to think about, focus and non-focus. If you want someone to remember something, you need to put more attention onto that moment. If you want them to forget about something, put less attention onto it. Because if memory is just attention in the past, what they can remember is where they had the most amount of attention. They will remember those moments. And if you've not put much attention on it, they are less likely to remember those moments. So it means that if you look at an effect that you have, you can think, if I was to analyze this and I wanted them to remember this effect in a certain way, would it be better if they remembered that I never touched it? Would it be better if they remembered that this was named instead of selected? You know, whatever it is. Would it be better if they forgot at all that I handed this to them in the beginning? Well, by doing that, if you say yes and no to these certain things, then you can say, okay, well, I'm just going to make sure I put more attention onto the areas that I want them to remember and less attention onto the areas that I want them to forget. That alone will really, truly impact so many aspects of your work. Instead of just doing an effect, I'm doing bamboozle. I don't know if there is an effect called bamboozle, but although my good friend Danny Buckler wants there to be. But isn't that right, Danny? It's true. But instead of just doing a trick, at the end of the day, you're doing it for a living, breathing person, normally, and they're going to remember something about it, hopefully. And so if you can impact that, wouldn't that be a good thing? Often, does it really matter what you do, or does it matter more what they remember? Because what you do only lasts for a brief moment in time. What they remember can potentially, not getting pretentious here, but it can potentially last a lifetime. So if that's the case, do you just want to let chance dictate how they remember it, or would you want to put something in place that means they're going to misremember those events in the way that you want them to? I'll tell you a quick story. This was something told to me many, many years ago. I was only about 15 years old, and there was a magician who was a gigging magician, and I kind of looked up to him thinking, oh my gosh, he's out there doing gigs, operating in the real world, doing this stuff. And he told me this story where he went and did a job one year at this fancy manor house, and he did the effect, a kind of a haunted pack effect, or spooked, or whatever it is, where you basically spread out a deck of cards, you don't touch it, or put the cards down and they cut and the card springs out. Haunted pack style effect. Disconnected, and yet the card springs out. Okay? And he also did a card on sealing. And he did this for the main person that booked him. And everything went well, blah, blah, blah. He was then rebooked to do that job the next year. And the person that booked him came running up to him and said, oh, it's so great that you're here again. Everyone was talking about what you did. And one of my friends left early last year and she never got to see you work. And we've been telling her all year about you. And, she's been looking forward to it. Would you please come and show her the thing that you did for us? And obviously the first question you're going to ask as a performer is like, what was that? You're not going to necessarily remember exactly what you did. And she said, when you threw the cards up on the ceiling and my card moved across the ceiling. And he was like, oh, that one, of course. Oh, that was just a special one for you. That was just, I can do many others. Let me show some others. And, to me, I remember hearing that, and this magician was telling this story, and I remember a few other people just kind of going, oh, isn't that funny? Aren't laymen silly? Whereas to me, it was profound. It was, oh, wow, they have literally combined two effects into one. Now, that opens up even more things. If you do one effect and you do another, does that mean they might meld them in time? Probably. So that opens up questions about what effect followed by another effect, if they push them together, would make them both more impressive or both into something more strange and interesting. You know, the way in which people's memories work is difficult to analyze and state and talk about specifically. But one thing you do know is that they will not have an exact recollection of events. Memory is not a recording. Memory is a construction. It is a construction of events based on perceptions and all kinds of things, but it's a construction, or rather a reconstruction of events. And in fact, every time you go back into a memory, you're effectively reconstructing it again. And so when it comes to the magic that you do, not only specifically in an effect can you manipulate that by putting attention on, or more attention onto some things and less on others, but also the words that you say, the effect that follows it. All of these things can really truly affect how someone remembers it over time. You might not care. You might not care. You might just go, I just want to do a thing and then disappear into the night, flick my cape and I'm gone, like Batman. Maybe. But maybe you start thinking about what they remember. And maybe that's the effect. Maybe it's not about what you do. Maybe it's about what they think you do over time. And I think just the mere notion of that as an idea is something worth thinking about. So this is one of those things that I think magicians get unnerved by when someone asks how. It's a tricky thing, I think, especially when you start, because you just kind of squirm and go, what? I don't know. You know, it's a tricky thing. How do you deal with that? Because you have this performance piece that you've done, whatever it is, and you've done this thing, and then you have this genuine moment when someone might really ask you some genuine questions, and you don't necessarily want to be deceptive about it, but also you can't tell them and ruin it. Not because there's any code, but because you just don't want to ruin it. It would just completely kill anything. You know, there's a great irony at the heart of magic. You know, we are the ones that love this art form, that practice it, that do all the stuff, and yet we're the only person in the room that can't experience magic. You know, we know how it's working. We're not experiencing magic when we're doing it whatsoever. Only they can. And, you know, we're not keeping secrets from them. We're keeping them for them. And so when it comes to the question of how, I tell them. I just tell them how. Slightly codified, but I will just say things like, you know, magic rather. Magic is about attention and perception. You know, it's about structure, it's about technique. And the goal is to balance all of those things so that all the seams disappear and all you're left with is something that feels impossible, no matter which way you think about it. And they might say, oh, no, I know, but then how did it get under the glass or whatever it is? And so, again, I'll tell them and I'll say, well, you know, I could tell you specifically, but in doing so, it's literally ruining the entire point. You know, the bottom line is that the real secrets are not actually hidden anyway. Only the trivial ones are. You know, the real secrets are that you are just, you know, I could say, I tell you what, this is what happened. You named a card, and when you named it, I then looked through the deck like this, and I cut it, and then I took it out like this, and then I just put it under the glass when you weren't looking. I mean, that's the method, you know, and it really, when you break down a lot of magic effects, a lot of them operate in that way. Those aren't the real secrets. Those are the trivial ones. And the real secrets are right out there in the open. The trivial ones are hidden. And so why expose the trivial ones? They don't really matter. So I often talk about the bigger ones. And they won't believe you anyway, even if you tell them. If you told them some of the methods, they wouldn't really believe it. They certainly all of a sudden wouldn't appreciate that that's what really happened and all the skill that went into it. So often I just talk about what magic really is. If someone asks me, I'll say it's about kind of playing with psychology and timing and technique to a point where you can't feel any of the seams anymore. And the best part about it is that it's about something you see, something you don't see, and there's the thing that you remember. And my job is to basically make all of those appear to be the same thing. And there's many different elements to it, but you can do something as simple as this, and I might kind of show something. And often when I'm doing that and talking about magic in that way, I'm literally telling them the methods of magic. So when they've asked me, I have told them. They just haven't earned the right to understand, or they don't know how to decode that information, but I have told them. And I quite like talking about it in that way. There's no point in telling someone the trivial method of, there were 2 cards there. I just swapped the top card on the top when you weren't looking. They wouldn't believe you anyway, and they'll just go, oh. So why not actually tell them? And actually tell them what's happening with it. And open up a deeper conversation. It can be infuriating for some people, I'm sure. But then there is a route for them to find out. My job isn't to make things easy for them. One of the routes would be to study magic. It's not hard. They could start studying magic and very quickly they would find some of the answers to those things. So I think for me, when it comes to the question of how, I would say just be honest and tell them. This is a big one. It's a mistake that amateurs make. Amateurs is the wrong word. Beginners, like rank beginners, will make. Even some intermediate people, I suppose, but just magicking people to death. I think that there are, of course, too many effects that someone can see. I mean, if you really look at what a magic effect has done, it's kind of, often blown their mind and they don't know what's happened. What more can you do after that, really? How much more can you blow their mind than 100% mind blown? Now, I know it's a seductive thing when someone reacts and someone's in that state. And it's a really nice thing to go, okay, I'll do this again and again and again. But it doesn't give the magic enough space to breathe. And I think that's something that people do. I've seen so many times where someone has done an effect and they're immediately running it. Oh, let me show you this one. And this person is still reeling from that previous effect. So giving an individual effect enough space to breathe is really important. And if you then decide to do another one, just giving that first one the space to breathe, and then this next one, how are they ready for it yet? Are they in the right state for it yet? And then how many of those do you do? Do you do 2? Do you do 3? I've seen people do 8, 9, 10 effects for someone, and I'm just looking at it and go, they're not going to remember any of it. There's just going to be a general malaise of card stuff and things, and they won't remember any of it. And I think that each effect beyond maybe 3 starts to dilute the kind of potency and uniqueness of what they experience. So there's only so much someone can take. And because they don't understand magic, they don't have a framework, a structure to hang their experience on. They're just going to remember a couple of things and then they're going to merge everything together. So it also means that it's like we were talking about memory previously. You need to think about the effects you do. Are they distinctly different enough to make sense? Will they be able to remember this one and this one? It's not always, there are many environments and times when you might need to do a few more, but I think it's knowing when to stop is really important. And like I said, it's something that people that are beginning often do too much. They do too much of people, and it just starts losing its specialness now. Oh, great, you can just do anything. Okay, of course, great. So learning how to do just enough, I think comes with time, patience, judgment, control, and doing just the right amount and just letting it breathe and letting it sit and just ultimately just knowing when to stop. It's a huge, huge part of your abilities to create powerful magic. Well, it's going to happen, so you just have to deal with it. Every magician that you know worth their salt, anyone that you think is any good, has been caught more times than you imagine. It's one of the prerequisites, I think, to becoming good. It's not a big deal. It really isn't a big deal. If you're an architect, or I don't know, and you build bridges. If you fail at your job, many people might die. What's the worst that can happen when you fail at magic? Okay, fine. You didn't get the card right. You messed up. Someone caught you with a card in your palm or whatever. So what? Now, obviously, we don't want that to happen. We don't, of course. But it's not the biggest problem in the world, is it? The problem is just about your pride, ego, self-confidence, whatever it is. But really, getting caught is part and parcel of it. If you try to eliminate any possibility of you ever getting caught, you have basically removed massive chunks of your potential learning journey and learning experience. You have to first of all realize it's not a big deal. First of all, realize it's the way you improve. If you get caught a number of times, you very quickly learn how to never get caught again with that thing, and it's almost the only way. For whatever reason, when I started, I just started doing things immediately. I did things like watch steals and top changes and bold moves before I really was ready to do them, and I got busted doing them. Palms as well, I got busted doing those things early on, especially within the first 5 years of doing magic. You're going to get busted now and again, right? And some people say, oh, but I can't deal with that. And, if my friends see it, then they'll know. And you go, okay, well, the universe doesn't care. That's just, if you want to be good, then you're going to get caught, because ultimately you're going to have to take risks and you're going to have to push in order to get better. So that's just part and parcel of it. The thing is to realize that it's your fault. Instead of trying to eliminate this happening immediately before it happens, is that when it happens, just go, okay, it was my fault. What that's done is show me that I've got something to learn. It shows me an area where I've either got improvements to make, or I've got errors in my judgment, or problems with my timing, or my technique, or the structure of the routine, or the psychology wasn't right. Whatever it is, it's your fault. And even if it wasn't, it still is. I would suggest adopting that attitude, because you're more likely to improve and look much deeper into your work if you do that. So if you look at it that way and care less about that process, very quickly you'll find yourself gaining experience and improving much, much faster. This requires you having to, let your ego drop a bit and any sense of pride, and just figuring out how you deal with that. But over time, experience teaches you how to avoid those scenarios. In fact, you learn to predict the potential problem or getting caught coming, and you learn to avoid it before it even happens. But you only learn those types of lessons through initially getting busted. And when it happens, you just have to chalk it up. So, well, that's that. I made an error there. And occasionally it happens to me. To this day, thankfully, not that often, but that's only because I've been caught so many times in the past. I've been busted or caught more times than most people have had successes in that area. But occasionally it still can happen. And when it does, I feel there's something that I can learn from that. And I feel like it's a gift in a way. And I think that attitude means I'm also not scared to try something. I'm not scared to do something again. It's not a nice feeling, don't get me wrong. I don't revel in it. Of course it's not. In the moment, it's horrible. You want the earth to open up and just swallow you. It's not nice. There's egg on your face. It's not great. I get it completely. But in time, you'll realize, you'll look back and you end up thanking every person that ever busted you, every person that ever caught you doing something or suspected something before it happened or whatever it was. You'll end up in time thanking those people, because those people now, they don't remember. That was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it was. They don't remember. So they're not holding on to that memory. So it's like it never happened. So you've got all the benefits from being busted and being caught, but it's like it never happened. And so I think when it comes to getting caught, the first thing is to realize it will happen. And the second thing is that it's not a big deal. And so just move forward and learn from it and realize that it's actually a gift. Practice. Now, this is a big one. Learning the secrets, learning the methods, knowing the hows isn't enough. You have to practice, like anything, especially if you want to get good. But one of the things I'll immediately say about it is that you have to try and have fun with it. I know that obviously in here we're talking about theory stuff, and maybe this seems heavy, and maybe in some of the explanations and stuff like that, I think, gosh, he takes that really seriously, doesn't it? Well, I do, but I also don't. I also know that this is as meaningless or meaningful as anything else in life. And my main concern is to have fun when doing what I'm doing. Doing this here is interesting and fun and challenging. This entire project has been. The practice that I do when I'm practicing moves or ideas or routines, I find ways to enjoy what that is. I'm always trying to play with new things and experiment with ideas. Just basically keep your hand, or hands even, and your mind nimble, and often work harder than I need to when it comes to practice. It's like running with rocks on your back. It's like training harder than you need to, so that when it comes to performance, you can play under speed. I like that as well. Ultimately, I'm trying to make it more effortless and easier for me in performance by the work that I put in behind the scenes. But when you say work, it doesn't have to be, with grimacing and everything else. It's fun. And the point is to take joy in the process. It's one of the reasons that I always have these with me, because that way I can practice at the moment's notice. Whatever it is, I'm sat somewhere at a waiting room, whatever it may be. I don't know, on a plane, it doesn't matter. I've always, although when you're on a plane, they get that really annoying pop in them, which is very, very frustrating, but that's not the point. The point is that they should become an extension of you. They just live in the hands, and it becomes a ritual. It becomes meditation in a box on some level. But they are also just a toy. And I want to enjoy the practice of it. I want to enjoy the play, enjoy the execution, enjoy all elements of it. And I kind of take it seriously, but don't take myself seriously within it. And I think that the biggest part about magic really is to try and have fun and find joy in the process. Now, if you can do that, find joy in the process and bring joy to others at the same time, then you're effectively mastering everything you need to. This is really your subject. This isn't mine. It doesn't belong to anyone else. No one can tell you how to do it. Effectively everything I'm doing here is just just describing my way. This is not a prescription of how you should do anything. This is just how I do it. And it's what I love, and it's my approach. But ultimately, if you start doing it, it's yours to love. No one else can tell you how to find joy from what you do. Find joy in the practice of it. Know that when it's hard and when it's challenging, that's a gift. That's something worth pursuing. And when you overcome things that are challenging and difficult, you feel a sense of achievement more than anything else. When something's very easy, you don't really have that same sense of achievement. When something's very difficult, you feel it. And so magic is an extraordinarily difficult subject to master, and it's also very simple at the same time. It's simultaneously both. And it's why I take tremendous joy in the practice of it, in the performance of it, in the communication of it, in meeting other people that can speak the same language. The practicing of magic is about being involved. It's about being connected and putting in effort. And if you can do so in a way where you find joy in that process, then you really are on a path towards mastery more than anything else. That really is the way to do it. It's fun, and it should be. And you'll probably encounter many people that want to turn it into something very serious. I'm not one of them, regardless. I might talk very seriously about it. For me, if you love it, right? If you love it, then in a way I've got nothing to teach you. I think that's the highest thing you can do. So, I think hopefully we've done that with this project in general, is to try and communicate the kind of passion that is involved across the board with everyone, from not just the material itself, but from the filming, the lighting, the edit, the grade, the locations, the space. Everything that we're doing is about a group of people that are incredibly passionate about magic. And this here is just one of those forms of expression. Everything about magic I love. And if you can find elements of magic to love, then you're on the right path. So hopefully this whole project has communicated aspects of that passion. And when you sit down with a deck of cards and you start to play, then just know that the primary goal is to enjoy that. And hopefully anything that we've done to contribute to that has been worthwhile.